I think what you're saying is really, really important. And I think I completely agree that so many women are now pushed to find solutions. In the past 10 years, we've seen so much of that consciousness change. We've seen women not allowing for those like old creepy men to dictate what we're doing anymore. And I think now with the pandemic, with this unbearable situation on everyone, and I think also with consciousness generally about the government and about the state and how it kind of adds to that sexism and oppression that women experience, I think now women are actually looking for a solution, and a solution that will solve it in the long term, not just, but like, even though there's obviously a major victory that the Me Too movement had, but not just locking up the perverts from the past, but completely preventing that from happening again and again and again now. So I think the main question that we need to ask ourselves now is what is actually needed? What is the solution? So what do you think the solution is for working class women, and what is the International Socialist Alternative putting forward as the solution?
Well, basically, we need socialist feminism. And I think that like socialism is becoming clearer to people more and more, but also the need for us to fight on things that affect women specifically as well is becoming more and more obvious. So I think in terms of like socialism, we need a socialist healthcare system. I mean, that's clear to everybody because of this pandemic. But mainly women working in the healthcare system are being affected by privatization, not getting a pay rise, and, you know, working in unsafe conditions, but also as service users, like many countries where privatization exists in the healthcare system, women suffer with their health as well. And so what we call for and what we fight for is publicly owned healthcare system that's fully funded, but also that it's democratically controlled by workers and service users, rather than leaving it in the hands of governments who are only, you know, concerned with profit and not providing a proper service. But also, I think it's revealed what kind of education system we need. Obviously, women have been the hardest hit by schools being closed and having to look after children, and that raises lots of questions about, you know, we need free childcare, but also we need free education and, you know, safe working conditions in schools as well. Related to domestic violence, like there's been some governments that have had to step in and increase funding a little bit during the pandemic to deal with the increase in domestic violence. But for the previous decades, these services were being cut back to the bone. And so we don't want just more funding into services, but dealing with, the class questions that are raised around domestic violence, about being able to get out of violent relationships, being able to afford somewhere to live, having a job that pays enough for you to survive by yourself, and so on, as well as funding shelters for people fleeing violent relationships. But also it's dealing with the system that perpetuates these ideas, like Yaara was saying before, about why are there so many powerful people that abuse women, that carry out sexual abuse? It's because of ideas about women under capitalism. So we don't want just more money and better services, but also sex and relationship education that talks about consent and talks about, what proper relationships should be like, control over the justice system, democratic control. So we're not relying on bigoted judges to make decisions about whether to convict rapists and so on. And so I think just generally it showed, the pandemic has exposed capitalism in so many ways, not just in terms of like healthcare and jobs and so on, but also in terms of the ideology of capitalism. And we challenge that with the ideology of socialism. And we would say to women that are trying to fight for all of these things that to be able to pay for these services and to be able to change the system, we also need to fight for nationalization of like the finance industry, of the commanding heights of the economy, the big companies, and carry out international planning so that working class women and workers of all genders can have control over their lives.